She walked into the conference room wearing a cream blazer and the smile of someone who'd never been told no. I sat there, clutching the payroll I'd kept stable for a decade. 3 minutes later, I was fired for innovation, but 3 weeks later, I sent a single Excel file to legal and watched $89 million evaporate from their balance sheet. They thought they fired an employee. They didn't know they'd just fired the only person who knew what the system was hiding. My name is Madeline York, and for 10 years, I was the invisible backbone of Crestwood and Ivy's internal audit department. Invisible by choice in private equity. The best auditors are the ones nobody notices until something goes catastrophically wrong. The morning they fired me started like any other. Coffee at 6:30 a.m. First one in the office by 7. Reviewing quarterly reconciliations that would make most people's eyes glaze over. I liked the precision of it. The way numbers told stories if you knew how to listen. At 38, I'd built a reputation for finding discrepancies others missed. For asking uncomfortable questions politely enough that people answered them anyway. The email came at 9:47 a.m. Urgent meeting, conference room C, 10 a.m., no subject line, no context, HR's signature move. I knew before I walked in, the way conversations stopped when I passed the break room, the sympathetic glance from Janet in accounting, the presence of Brad from HR, sitting with his hands folded over a manila folder that undoubtedly contained my severance package. Madeline, thank you for joining us, Brad began, his voice carrying that practiced empathy they must teach in HR certification courses. As you know, Crestwood and Ivy is entering an exciting phase of transformation. I let him talk. Transformation, restructuring, new vision, corporate euphemisms tumbling out like coins from a broken vending machine. The real translation was simple. You're out. Someone else is in. We're bringing in fresh perspectives, he continued. Aubrey Halston will be taking over your responsibilities, effective immediately. Aubrey Halston. I'd seen her LinkedIn announcement 2 weeks ago, Wharton MBA, class of last year, with a thesis on disrupting traditional audit paradigms through social innovation. Her father, Harrison Halston, owned 37% of Crestwood and Ivy. I understand, I said, because what else was there to say? I'd been in corporate America long enough to know that fighting this kind of decision was like arguing with gravity. They'd prepared everything. 2 weeks severance for every year of service generous by their standards. Cobra information. A glowing reference letter that made me sound like a competent relic from a bygone era. Even a banker's box for my personal items. Thoughtfully provided. I packed methodically. The cactus my daughter gave me 3 years ago. A handful of awards that suddenly seemed quaint. My coffee mug. World's okayest auditor, a Secret Santa gift that had become oddly precious, and tucked between my legitimate personal items, almost forgotten. An external hard drive no bigger than a deck of cards. It wasn't theft. Technically, the drive contained copies of reports I'd created, analyses I'd run, patterns I'd noticed but hadn't yet formally submitted, my insurance policy, though I'd never called it that, just the paranoid habit of someone who'd seen too many good people thrown under buses to save quarterly earnings. Brad walked me to the elevator, maintaining that professional smile. Aubrey's very excited to build on your foundation, he said. She has some innovative ideas about modernizing the department. I'm sure she does, I replied, shifting the box in my arms. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of her through the glass walls of conference room A, cream blazer, definitely designer, gesturing animatedly to a group of executives who nodded along like dashboard bobbleheads. 24 years old with an Instagram account full of motivational quotes and acai bowls, about to take over a department that handled $9 billion in assets. The security guard at the front desk, Thomas, who'd shown me pictures of his grandkids every Monday for 5 years, wouldn't meet my eyes as I surrendered my keycard. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its usual Tuesday morning chaos. Taxis honked, pedestrians pushed past. The city didn't care that my career had just been sacrificed on the altar of nepotism. I hefted the box and started walking toward the subway. Inside, between a framed photo of my daughter and a stress ball shaped like a calculator, the external hard drive sat quietly. 3 terabytes of data, 10 years of patterns, and buried in those files, things I'd noticed but kept to myself, waiting for the right moment to address them properly. through proper channels, like a good employee should. They thought they'd fired just another middle manager. They had no idea what they'd just set in motion. 3 weeks into unemployment, I developed a routine. Morning run in Prospect Park, job applications until noon, then lunch while scrolling through LinkedIn to watch my former life unfold in real time. That's how I learned about Aubrey's revolution. Thrilled to announce we're redefining what internal audit means at Crestwood and Ivy, her first post declared. Data isn't just numbers, it's inspiration. Disrupt the audit in a future of finance, #Aubrey Vision. The comments were a masterclass in corporate sycophancy. Brilliant perspective. So refreshing. Can't wait to see your innovations. My phone buzzed. Sarah Winters, one of the few analysts I'd trusted completely, texting from her personal number. You need to see what's happening here. Coffee. We met at a diner in Queens, far from Midtown's prying eyes. Sarah looked exhausted. Stress etched in lines that hadn't been there a month ago. She fired 6 people yesterday, Sarah said without preamble. Morrison, Linda, Patrick, all the senior auditors, replaced them with her sorority sisters and some guy who runs a mindfulness podcast. You're joking. I wish. The new team had their first meeting yesterday. They spent 2 hours discussing energy alignment and spreadsheet design. I'm not even sure what that means. I stirred my coffee. Processing this. What about the Q4 planning the derivatives audit? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, that's the best part. Aubrey declared traditional auditing too restrictive. We're now doing something called intuitive financial storytelling. She literally said spreadsheets should make people feel things. The SEC is really going to love that approach. It gets worse. Sarah glanced around, then pulled out her phone. One of her new hires. This kid named Tristan. He's been reimagining our financial models. Changed a bunch of formulas because they didn't align with his vision. Nobody's checking his work because Aubrey told us to trust the process. She showed me a screenshot of an internal memo. Aubrey's signature was in purple cursive font. The content made my blood run cold. She was dismantling every control mechanism I'd spent a decade building. Is anyone pushing back? I asked. With what leverage Harrison Halston sits on the board, the other partners think his daughter walks on water. She gave this presentation last week about transforming Crestwood and Ivy into a feeling-forward financial institution. They ate it up. My phone vibrated. Another LinkedIn notification. Aubrey had just posted a photo of her redesigned office, my old office. Gone were the regulatory handbooks and dual monitors. In their place, a meditation corner, inspirational posters, and what appeared to be a cotton candy machine. There's more, Sarah continued, voice dropping. Remember the Thornfield acquisition model, the one we flagged for review? I nodded. Thornfield was a complicated deal involving 17 shell companies and derivative instruments so complex they made my head hurt. I'd been planning a deep dive before my termination. Tristan's been playing with it, making improvements. He uploaded something to the shared drive yesterday. I think it was supposed to be a test version, but, she shrugged. Who knows what's test and what's real anymore? Aubrey has us working in something she calls creative chaos mode. Please tell me someone's maintaining version control. Sarah's silence was answer enough. After she left, I sat in that diner for another hour, watching Manhattan's skyline through greasy windows. 10 years of careful work, dismantled in 3 weeks by someone who thought Excel was a feeling. That night, I opened my laptop and plugged in the external drive, file after file of historical data, audit trails, pattern analyses, all the threads I'd been following, the questions I'd been too polite to ask while employed. My phone lit up with another text from Sarah. Quarterly investor report draft due next week. Aubrey just announced we're incorporating interpretive dance into the presentation. I can't tell if she's serious. Please tell me you kept copies of the old templates. I looked at the drive, then at my laptop screen. Sometimes the universe sends you signs. Sometimes it sends you a 24-year-old with a trust fund and a fundamental misunderstanding of federal securities law. I might have something, I texted back. Give me a few days. The call came at 11:23 p.m. on a Thursday. Sarah, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Madeline, I need you to look at something. I'm sending you a file. Please tell me I'm seeing things wrong. My laptop dinged with an encrypted email. Inside a spreadsheet titled Q4 Preliminary Report. Final Tristan Innovation Model. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. The numbers swam before my eyes, not because they were complex, because they were catastrophically wrong. Tristan had somehow managed to double-count asset valuations across multiple portfolios, creating phantom gains that inflated the bottom line by I had to calculate it 3 times to believe it $89 million. Sarah, I said slowly, this has already been submitted to someone, hasn't it? Preliminary copies went to 3 institutional investors this afternoon. Aubrey wanted to give them an early preview of our exceptional quarter. The official filing isn't due for 2 weeks, but if anyone makes investment decisions based on these numbers, we both knew how that sentence ended. Securities fraud, market manipulation, the kind of charges that came with orange jumpsuits and federal prosecutors who'd built careers on taking down financial institutions. I pulled up my archived files, cross-referencing the real valuations with Tristan's fantasy mathematics. The error was almost elegant in its stupidity. He'd created a circular reference that fed on itself, compounding the mistake through 17 different calculations. It was the kind of error a first-year analyst would catch, if anyone was still checking. Who else has seen this? I asked. The preliminary report. Just the investors and senior management. But Madeline, there's worse. I found out why Tristan made the error. He's been using some kind of AI tool to optimize our formulas. Aubrey encouraged it, said traditional Excel was limiting our potential. I rubbed my temples. Please tell me there's an audit trail. What audit trail? Aubrey disbanded the documentation requirements. Said they were creativity killers. Everything's being saved to personal drives with names like Vibe Check and Money Manifestation. Over the next 3 days, I barely slept. I mapped every error, every miscalculation, every place where Aubrey's innovation had transformed sound financial reporting into expensive fiction. The $89 million was just the headline. Underneath lurked a dozen smaller discrepancies that painted a picture of complete institutional failure. My old colleague from Deutsche Bank called on Sunday. Hey, Madeline, weird question. I'm looking at Crestwood and Ivy's preliminary numbers, and something seems off. The yields on your structured products look impossibly high. You still there? No, I said carefully. I left about a month ago. A pause. That explains a lot. Who's running audit now? Aubrey Halston. Harrison's daughter, the one with the lifestyle blog. That's her. Jesus Christ. Monday morning brought another Sarah text. Emergency meeting at 2 p.m. Investors asking questions. Aubrey says not to worry. The universe will provide clarity. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the evidence I'd compiled. 3 options lay before me. I could do nothing, let it play out, watch from the sidelines as the SEC inevitably descended. I could reach out to Aubrey directly, try to explain the magnitude of the disaster she'd created, though someone who thought spreadsheets needed to inspire emotions probably wouldn't grasp securities law violations. Or I could use the one card I'd held in reserve for years. In 2016, I'd quietly prevented a major compliance violation that would have personally implicated several board members. The head of legal, Derek Hale, had been grateful enough to give me his personal email. If you ever need anything, he'd said. I wondered if he'd meant it. Sarah called again that evening. You're not going to believe this. When the investors questioned the numbers, Aubrey did a presentation on financial truth as a fluid concept. She actually used those words. One of the investors walked out halfway through. Who? Brennan from Clearwater. He looked like he was having an aneurysm. Clearwater managed pension funds, real people's retirements. The weight of what was happening settled over me like a lead blanket. That night, I made my decision. I opened a new email, typing Derek Hale's address from memory. No subject line, just an attachment, a single Excel file documenting everything, with a brief note. You might want to review this before the Q4 filing. The preliminary reports contain material misstatements. I hesitated before hitting send. Once this email left my outbox, there was no taking it back, but I thought about the pension funds, the retail investors, the employees whose 401ks were tied to Crestwood and Ivy's performance. Click. The email disappeared into the digital ether. Now all I could do was wait. The response came faster than I'd expected. 6:14 a.m. My phone buzzing with an unknown number. Madeline, this is Derek Hale. We need to talk, not over the phone. 2 hours later, I sat in a Starbucks on the Upper West Side, watching Derek walk through the door. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the 5 weeks since my termination. His usual pristine suit was rumpled, his tie slightly askew. "I've been up all night," he said without preamble, sliding into the seat across from me. "That file you sent, please tell me you have documentation to support every claim." I pulled out a flash drive. "Everything's here. Source documents, calculation trails, timestamps. I kept copies of all my work product." He pocketed the drive like it was radioactive. "Do you understand what you've uncovered? This isn't just an accounting error. If we filed those numbers with the SEC, you'd be looking at criminal charges," I finished. "I know. It's worse than that. I did some digging after I got your email. This isn't Aubrey's first creative interpretation of financial regulations. 3 of our institutional investors have already made moves based on those preliminary reports. Clearwater shifted $70 million in pension allocations." The coffee tasted bitter in my mouth. "Based on fictional returns. Based on returns that, according to your analysis, are off by approximately $89 million. He leaned forward. "Madeline, I need to know, is this malicious or just incompetence?" I'd spent days wrestling with the same question. "I think it's both. Aubrey's incompetence created the environment, but someone should have caught this. The fact that no one did suggests either spectacular negligence or willful blindness. Or both." Derek rubbed his face. "Harrison's been pushing aggressive growth targets. Maybe his daughter thought she was helping by making the numbers work. Through interpretive dance and energy alignment." Despite everything, he almost smiled. "I heard about that. Also heard she installed a ball pit in the conference room for breakthrough thinking sessions." "Please tell me you're joking." "I wish, but that's the least of our problems now." His expression turned serious again. "I'm taking this to the board tonight. Emergency session. This can't wait for the regular quarterly meeting." I nodded, then hesitated. "Derek, there's more. The Thornfield acquisition, I'd flagged some concerns before I left. With Aubrey's improvements to the modeling, I'm worried those issues have been magnified." "How magnified?" "Potentially another 40 to 50 million in misrepresented liabilities." He actually paled. "Christ, we're looking at over 100 million in fictional valuations." "Conservative estimate. I haven't had access to the most recent data." For the next hour, I walked him through my findings. Each revelation seemed to hit him like a physical blow. The disbanded compliance protocols, the replacement of experienced auditors with Aubrey's hand-picked team of visionaries, the AI-generated formulas that no one understood or verified. "She fired Morrison," he asked at one point. "He's been here 20 years. Replaced him with someone whose previous experience was running a YouTube channel about manifesting wealth through positive thinking." "You can't be serious." I pulled up the new hire's LinkedIn profile on my phone. Derek stared at it like it might bite him. As we prepared to leave, he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Why didn't you report this while you were still employed?" I met his eyes. "Because I was building the case properly, following protocols, going through channels. Then they fired me to make room for the owner's daughter, and suddenly those channels didn't exist anymore." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, Madeline, I argued against your termination, but Harrison was adamant about giving Aubrey a chance to prove herself." "Well, she certainly proved something." "Indeed." He stood, pocketing my documentation. "I'll need you to stay available. Once this hits the board, things are going to move fast. There might be questions only you can answer." "I'll be ready." As he reached the door, he turned back. "Madeline, that file you sent, why anonymous? You could have signed it, taken credit for catching this." I thought about it for a moment. "Because this isn't about credit. It's about stopping a disaster before it destroys people's retirements. Besides," I added with a slight smile, "anonymous sources are so much harder to discredit as disgruntled former employees." He gave me a long look. "You know, we're going to need a new head of internal audit soon. Someone who actually understands what the job entails." "Let's survive the next 72 hours first," I said. "Then we can talk about the future." As I watched him disappear into the Manhattan morning crowd, I felt the first real stirring of satisfaction since my termination. I'd lit the fuse. Now all that remained was to watch where the explosion took down. The explosion came at 9:47 p.m. that same night. Sarah's text was just 3 words: check your email. The forward from Derek was marked confidential, urgent action required. The board had convened an emergency session at 7 p.m. By 9:30, they'd voted unanimously to launch an immediate internal investigation and freeze all financial reporting pending a complete audit review. But it was the recipient list that made me smile. Every senior partner, every board member, the entire C-suite, and notably absent Aubrey Halston. My phone rang. Derek, sounding exhausted but oddly energized. "I've been in board meetings for 23 years, he said. "I've never seen anything like tonight. When I presented your analysis, Harrison actually stood up and left the room. His daughter just vaporized $89 million. I'd need a minute too." $112 million. Actually, we found more issues after deeper review. "Madeline, I need to ask, can you come in tomorrow unofficially? We need someone who understands these systems to help us unravel this mess." "What about Aubrey's team of visionaries?" "Currently being interviewed by our outside counsel. Turns out manifesting wealth through positive thinking doesn't hold up well under legal scrutiny." I agreed to come in, though not without some satisfaction at the reversal of fortune. The next morning, walking through Creswood and Ivy's lobby felt surreal. Thomas, the security guard, actually smiled at me. "Good to see you back, Ms. York, even if it's just visiting." The elevator ride to the executive floor had never felt shorter. When the doors opened, I stepped into barely controlled chaos. Legal associates hustled between offices with bankers' boxes. The compliance team had taken over 2 conference rooms, their walls covered with printouts of financial models, red circles and arrows mapping the trail of errors. Derek met me at reception. "Before we go in, you should know Harrison resigned from the board this morning, effective immediately." "Because of Aubrey." "Because our outside counsel found emails where he pressured the previous CFO to make room for fresh perspectives in critical positions. There's potential liability issues." He led me to conference room A, the same one where I'd glimpsed Aubrey on my last day. Now it housed a forensic accounting team from Ernst & Young, their laptops and calculators covering every surface. "Madeline York," Derek announced. "She authored the initial report that triggered this investigation." The lead forensic accountant, a woman named Patricia Stern, looked up from her screen. "Ms. York, I've been reviewing your documentation. It's impressively thorough. How long did you suspect these issues?" "I didn't suspect anything while I was employed," I said carefully. "I simply maintained detailed records of all my work. The patterns only became clear when I had time to review everything comprehensively." Patricia's knowing look suggested she wasn't buying the coincidence, but she moved on. "We need to understand the Thornfield acquisition modeling. Your notes indicate concerns about derivative valuations." For the next 6 hours, I walked them through years of institutional knowledge, every shortcut Aubrey's team had taken, every control they'd dismantled, every place where innovation had replaced basic accounting principles. Around 2 p.m., Sarah appeared in the doorway. She looked like she'd been crying. "They just escorted Aubrey out," she said quietly. "Security packed her office. The cotton candy machine is gone." "What about her team?" "Terminated. All of them. HR's calling it immediate separation pending investigation. Tristan was actually crying about his disrupted journey." Patricia looked up from her laptop. "We'll need to interview all of them, Ms. York. This Tristan, he really believed AI could replace human oversight in financial modeling. He wrote a Medium post about it," I said. "Called it the future of feeling-based finance." Dear God. As the afternoon wore on, the scope of the damage became clearer. Beyond the inflated valuations, Aubrey's innovations had created a compliance nightmare. Audit trails deleted, version controls abandoned, critical reports reimagined beyond recognition. "It's like she took a functioning system and decided to perform experimental surgery on it," Patricia muttered. "With a chainsaw." Around 5 p.m., Derek pulled me aside. "The board wants to meet with you. They have questions about how this happened." "When?" "Now, if you're willing." I thought about it. 5 weeks ago, these same people had signed off on my termination. Now they needed my expertise to clean up their mess. One condition, I said. I wanted acknowledged that I raised concerns about system integrity before my departure. My termination paperwork shows I was let go for failure to embrace innovation. I want that corrected. Derek nodded. I'll make sure of it. The boardroom hadn't changed, but the faces around the table had. Harrison's seat was empty. The remaining members looked shell-shocked, like hurricane survivors surveying the wreckage. As I took my seat, I thought about Aubrey's Instagram post from 3 weeks ago. Something about disrupting the old guard and making finance accessible to visionaries. Well, she'd certainly disrupted something. The question now was whether anything could be salvaged from the wreckage. I heard about Aubrey's meltdown from Sarah, who'd witnessed it firsthand. She came back around 7 p.m., trying to get into the building. Sarah told me over drinks that Friday. Security wouldn't let her pass the lobby. She actually stamped her foot like a toddler and demanded to speak to her father, who had already resigned. She didn't know that yet. When security told her, she went pale. Then she tried calling Harrison right there in the lobby. Put it on speaker, we could all hear it. He wouldn't take her call. I stirred my martini, feeling an unexpected twinge of sympathy. Then I remembered the $89 million and the feeling passed. What happened next? She pivoted to social media, started live streaming from the lobby, claiming she was being persecuted for being a disruptive female leader, said the old guard couldn't handle her innovations. Sarah pulled out her phone, showing me the video. 1,200 views before Instagram took it down for violating community guidelines. In the grainy footage, Aubrey looked nothing like the polished executive who'd taken my office 6 weeks ago. Her cream blazer was wrinkled, her carefully styled hair disheveled. She was ranting about financial patriarchy and vision persecution. The comments were brutal, Sarah continued. Someone leaked the preliminary numbers. Wall Street Twitter had a field day. They're calling it Vibesgate. Monday brought more fallout.